Hey everyone, today we're going to be covering a kind of unorthodox style of mid-range for Elestrals. Up until now, mainly what we've encountered for mid-range is going to be decks like lists that properly enchant their Elestrals so that they can get pretty powerful stat lines and effects, specifically Moss Station and Moose Station. Stat checking, it's 6 power and defense when they're obviously played correctly, and Moose Station specifically being able to do both. Now there's kind of a cool way that you can go about it from here because they've introduced a lot of suppression effects, things like Dense Fog and Spectrus. These are cards that kind of counter that kind of game plan a little bit, right? So if you're able to suppress and turn off their effects, they specifically, like Moss Station, for example, becomes a lot weaker. It loses battles against Spectrus, it just gets blown out to pretty much anything. And so what's kind of cool here is that today's take on a 5's list going forward is to play around these suppression style effects by essentially suppressing your Elestral from the get-go. What I mean by this is we're looking at things like Sorlet, Lumaru, and Necruff, and not really actually playing the spirits to properly enchant them. We're mostly going to be playing them with water, and these are just going to be tsunami proof 5 stat beaters, right? Nothing else going on here, right? You're just going to play Sorlet as a 5 power that cannot get tsunamied and does not lose to Dense Fog, does not get, at least will trade with Spectrus, right? So I guess to really quickly break down the game plan, playing mid-range, you're playing as spirit efficient as possible. You're not really taking expensive trades. You're mainly trading 1-for-1 with a lot of your Elestrals, just keeping the board clear, keeps your opponents from ascending, building up board presence. And if your opponent ever plays something that fails the stat check of 5, you're going to carry over an extra Elestral into the next turn or acquire some kind of counter rune or invoke rune to clear it, right? So you're not going to play any big expensive cards that are, requiring extra resources, things like that. You're playing the most efficient pound for pound, what can I get out of 1 spirit per, stat line type of thing. So that's what you're playing for the main Elestrals. We have some more powerful synergies built in with the Curabis and, good tempo swings with Lavalith and Resting. We have good blowouts against Nexus decks, for instance. And then, we're playing a lot of very efficient, good counter runes in the back, so that we can protect our board and then carry over our advantage. We would prefer to build out our board as far as possible because the more Elestrals we can stick on the board, the harder it is to answer, right? Without special ascensions, if you play one thing and your opponent can only play one thing and they trade, you're back to, net even. But if you play something and then, answer their board or whatever, and then they play something to clear yours and you, Shield, PTA, Gorgons, Tsunami, whatever, and then you carry over 2, they just can't clear it at that point. Before they had a lot of outs, right, with Resting, Earthquake, and Lavalith. They had ways to catch up on board. That's not as true anymore, so you kind of actually do really care about sticking 2 guys before they can land 1 type of thing, right? So if you ever get to carry over and have 2 threats on board and they have none, you're probably in a good position to win. It is a little bit simple, but that's kind of how the deck wants to play. And then in the water package, we get some kind of cool text, so we're going to get Eddie, of course, but then we can go a little bit further, go into Lunar ourselves and play Spectrus, Rock in a Hard Place, and then the 1 copy of Curabis. With the recent bans, this is a post-ban list and restrictions, there's going to be way less outs for 2-cost Elestrals. So if you're able to ascend into a 2-cost and, maybe a 3-cost, your opponent can only draw like a 1-of copy of Earthquake or Resting to answer it, right? So Curabis is actually just a really scary threat that, unless if it gets, position swapped, is going to pretty much clear everything, right? I'm pretty sure stat line clears all the other 2 costs. There's probably maybe some niche one that's better, but to my knowledge, I think it's one of the higher ones that's played right now. I mean, that thing is just a win con itself. You're going to play 1-of, right? If you drop Eddie with Rock in a Hard Place, you're gaming, right? We got Astrabbit, nothing to talk about there. And then we have our 1-of copy of Lavalith and Resting post restriction. Now I cut Earthquake. I don't know where to go with that one, right? If you look at the spirits are pretty thin. What I was trying out before was running Viscerus instead of Spectrus, and then running the 1-of copy of Earthquake, and then running some Earth Spirits, but it's really thin. And if you don't want to play Viscerus and you want to play Spectrus, you're looking at cutting your Owloons for your Earth Spirits, and then you're going to run 2 of each for a 1-of copy of Earthquake. I really don't know where to land on that one. So for right now, we're just not playing it, even though it is a really powerful card. I think that, it does kind of constrain your spirit count a little bit for this deck. Maybe it's possible to tweak some things around to get back to it, but for right now, this is where we're at. And then the rest of this is pretty self-explanatory. We're playing a bunch of good back row counters, and we're on shields just because, we're not. If we had 3 copies of Resting again, I think we would cut down on the shields, but we need, some back row to make up for it. And these keep a little bit of tempo going for us. And 3 copies of Ambrosia. Atlantis, I think, is maybe the odd one out here in the list. I think it's actually pretty good. It converts your hand fairly well. And if you can get these things up to 6, you're going to be winning basically every single mirror against another mid-range deck if they're not also playing a strategy like this. But if they're playing like normal mid-range or, like Earth Nexus, something like that, you can clear Stadium and then also present 6s. And if they're just vanilla 6s that are like not losing to Dense Fog or Spectrus or whatever, you have a pretty clear game plan to victory. And so this is a list to check out if you like the mid-range style, but maybe you didn't want to go into like the crowd style list, and maybe you like more water-based mid-range. This is something to try out. Some people might find it really boring that you are playing vanilla water enchanted 5s. Fair enough, right? But wanted to throw this list out here real quick. If you want to give it a go, let me know how it turns out for you. But until next time, thank you for watching.